The air in the house was thick, not just with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon, but with an unspoken tension that had been building for months. It was Christmas Eve, and my two children, Jason and Sarah, were finally home. They were in their late 20s, successful, and seemingly happy. Jason, a software engineer, and Sarah, a marketing manager, both living lives I had once dreamed of for myself. Yet as I watched them, a gnawing feeling of being an outsider in my own home had taken root. My ex-wife Lisa was also here. We had been divorced for 5 years, a clean break on paper, but emotionally, the scars were still fresh. She had moved on, and so had I, or so I told myself. We were cordial for the sake of the kids, a pretense of a functional family that felt more like a performance with each passing year. Lisa, a woman who had once been my whole world, now moved through the living room with an easy grace, a confident smile on her face that I rarely saw when we were together. The gifts were piled high under the Christmas tree, a testament to a year of consumerism and, I hoped, love. Jason and Sarah had been whispering in the corner, a conspiratorial look on their faces that did little to calm my unease. I watched as they approached Lisa, their hands behind their backs. "Mom," Sarah began, her voice brimming with a nervous excitement, "we have a surprise for you." Lisa's eyes lit up, and she gestured for them to proceed. Jason and Sarah then produced 2 sets of car keys, each with a distinctive logo on the fob, a Mercedes-Benz. My heart sank, a slow, painful descent. "It's not just any car, Mom," Jason said, his voice a proud whisper. "It's a brand new GLC 300. We wanted to get you something you truly deserved." Lisa's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. "Oh, my babies," she choked out, her voice filled with a raw, overwhelming emotion. "I don't know what to say." They all embraced, a perfect tableau of a family moment that I was not a part of. The sight of it was a punch to the gut. The laughter, the tears, the genuine joy, it was all for her. I stood there, a ghost in my own living room, watching the woman who left me being celebrated by the children I had raised. I had worked 3 jobs for years to put them through college, skipping vacations, driving the same beat-up pickup truck for 15 years, all so they could have the best. And now, they had bought their mother a luxury SUV, a tangible symbol of their affection and success. And me? My gift was still waiting, a small box under the tree with my name on it. Eventually, the initial euphoria subsided, and Lisa, her face still flushed with happiness, turned to me. "Isn't that amazing, David?" I forced a smile, the muscles in my face protesting the unaccustomed movement. "It's a wonderful gift," I said, my voice sounding distant and hollow even to my own ears. The moment had passed, but the storm was still brewing. It had been brewing for a long time, the feeling that I was a secondary character in the story of my own family. They called, they visited, they told me they loved me, but I had always felt a subtle disconnect, a sense that our relationship was more of an obligation than a genuine connection. Later, as the evening wound down, Jason and Sarah came over to me. They handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. My name was scribbled on the tag in Sarah's familiar handwriting. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in my hand. I knew it wasn't a car. I knew it wasn't anything remotely close. I unwrapped it slowly, the silence in the room suddenly deafening. Inside, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, were 2 pairs of new socks, black, wool blend, the kind you buy in a 3-pack at a department store. I looked at the socks, then at Jason and Sarah, their faces beaming with a casual, almost perfunctory happiness. They hadn't put thought into it. They had just bought a gift to check a box. The message was clear. I wasn't worth the effort. My life's work, my sacrifices, all the love I had poured into them was apparently only worth a pair of socks. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight in my chest that stole the air from my lungs. It was an anger so potent it made my vision blur. This wasn't just about the socks, this was about everything. The missed phone calls, the cancelled plans, the way they always seemed to talk to their mother first about their triumphs and their struggles. The way I had become an afterthought, a faded photograph on a dusty mantelpiece. I looked from the socks to my children's faces, then back to the socks. The contrast was too stark, too insulting. A brand new luxury SUV for their mother, and a pair of socks for the man who had given up everything for them. It was a slap in the face, a public declaration of my diminished importance in their lives. My voice, when it came, was a low, dangerous rumble. Socks, I said, holding them up. You gave your mother a brand new Mercedes and you gave me socks. The smiles on their faces faltered. Dad, come on, Jason said, his voice laced with a hint of defensiveness. It's just a gift. It's the thought that counts, right? Is it? I shot back, the anger finally spilling over. Because I don't see a whole lot of thought here. I see an expensive car for her and a cheap afterthought for me. This isn't just about the gifts. This is about what you think of me. It's about how you value me. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Don't make a big deal out of this, Dad. It's Christmas. I am making a big deal out of it, I said, my voice rising, because I've spent my entire life making a big deal out of you, out of your well-being, your education, your happiness, and this is what you give me in return, a pair of socks? The room went silent, the festive mood completely shattered. Lisa, who had been watching from the sidelines, finally stepped in. David, stop. You're ruining the night. I'm not ruining it, I said, my gaze fixed on my children. You are. You did this. You made me feel this way. And you know what? I'm done. I dropped the socks on the coffee table as if they were a hot coal. I'm done being the ghost in your lives. I'm done pretending that this family is anything close to functional. You want to pretend I don't exist? Fine. Tonight, that becomes a reality. With that, I turned and walked out of the living room, leaving the stunned silence behind me. I walked through the quiet house, grabbed my keys, and opened the front door. The cold December air hit me, a shock to the system. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay, not anymore. I had to get away from the painful truth that had been handed to me in a small, unassuming box. My kids had shown me exactly where I stood in their lives. And that night, I decided to cut them out of mine. The cold air was a relief, a sharp contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside the house. I got into my old pickup truck, the engine grumbling to life as if in protest. The familiar smell of worn leather and stale coffee filled the cab. This truck was my constant companion, a testament to a life of hard work and delayed gratification. I put it in reverse, the tires crunching on the gravel driveway, and drove off without a backward glance. The city streets were a blur of twinkling lights and hurried last-minute shoppers. Christmas carols played on the radio, a cruel irony that only deepened the ache in my chest. I drove for what felt like hours, a directionless journey of a man who had just lost everything he thought he had. My mind replayed the scene at the house, the looks on my children's faces, the pity in Lisa's eyes, the socks, always the socks. I ended up at a small diner on the outskirts of town, a place I hadn't been to in years. It was a no-frills kind of place, the kind where the coffee was strong and the conversation was sparse. I sat in a booth by the window, watching the snow begin to fall, a gentle white blanket covering the ugliness of the world. The waitress, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, brought me a cup of coffee without a word. She must have seen the defeated look on my face. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, the steam a temporary comfort against the icy cold inside me. My thoughts drifted back to the past, to the early days with Lisa, the sleepless nights with 2 crying babies, the pride I felt watching them take their first steps, the joy of teaching Jason how to ride a bike, and the quiet moments with Sarah reading her bedtime stories. I had given them my time, my energy, my youth. I had sacrificed my own dreams so they could have a better life. Was I a perfect father? No. I was often tired, sometimes short-tempered, but I had always been present. I had always been there. The divorce had been hard, a slow erosion of a marriage that had lost its foundation. Lisa and I had grown apart, our paths diverging as our children grew older. She was more social, more ambitious, and I was content with a simple, quiet life. But we had a deal. The children would always come first. They would always be our priority. And for a while, they were. But as they grew up, they became closer to Lisa. She was the one they confided in, the one they sought advice from. She had the glamour, the social life, the ease that I lacked. I was just Dad, the quiet man who worked too much. And somewhere along the way, I had become dispensable. I took a sip of my coffee, the bitter taste a perfect match for my mood. I pulled out my phone, a sudden desperate urge to text them, to apologize for ruining Christmas, to beg for their understanding. But then I remembered the socks, the cheap, thoughtless gift, and the urge vanished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. No, I wouldn't apologize. Not for telling the truth. I paid for my coffee and left, the snow now falling in thick, heavy flakes. I drove to the one place I knew would be empty and quiet, the old lake house, a small cabin I had inherited from my father, a place I had always planned to fix up and use for my retirement. It was a shell of a building, a project I had never had the time or money to start. I pulled up to the cabin, the headlights illuminating the snow-covered path. The place was a mess, dust motes dancing in the light, cobwebs hanging from the rafters. But it was my mess, my space. I lit a fire in the old stone fireplace, the warmth a small, comforting presence in the vast emptiness. I sat on the dusty floor, staring into the flickering flames, the events of the night replaying in my mind. The car, the hugs, the tears of joy, the socks, the shame, the anger, the grief. It was all a tangled mess of emotions, a knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. I had been so proud of my children, of their success, their independence. I had thought I had done a good job, but as I sat there in the silent cabin, I realized I had failed. I had raised two people who saw me as an ATM and a second-class citizen. I had poured my heart and soul into a family that didn't see me as an equal, but as an obligation, and I had to decide what to do next. I could go back, apologize, and pretend everything was fine. I could continue to be the ghost in the living room, the man who was only called when they needed something. Or I could do what I had said I would do. I could cut them out. It was a terrifying thought. They were my children, my flesh and blood. But what was the alternative? To continue to be a source of pain and resentment? To live a life of quiet desperation, hoping for a love that was never fully given? I watched the fire crackle, the flames dancing and swaying, a living, breathing thing in the dark. I made my decision right then and there. I wouldn't go back. Not tonight. Not ever. My life with them was over. I was on my own now, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a strange sense of liberation, a quiet peace that came with letting go. The socks were just socks, but they were also the final straw, the symbol of a relationship that had been broken for a very long time. And tonight, I wasn't just walking away from the socks. I was walking away from the pain, the disappointment, and the ghosts of a family that had never truly been whole. I was walking into the quiet, snow-covered night, ready to start over, ready to find my own life again. The morning light filtering through the dusty windows of the cabin was pale and unforgiving. The fire from the night before had long since died, leaving behind a pile of grey ash and a cold hearth. I was still sitting on the floor, my back against the wall, a numbing exhaustion having finally taken over. I felt like a man who had just run a marathon and hadn't crossed the finish line. I got up stiffly, my joints protesting with every movement. The silence in the cabin was profound, a stark contrast to the noise and chaos of my life just a few hours ago. I walked to the small, grimy kitchen, found a box of instant coffee and a dusty mug. The water from the tap was ice cold, and I had to boil it in a pot over the small gas stove. The simple act of making coffee felt like a monumental task, a small victory in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. As I sipped the bitter liquid, my phone buzzed. A text message from Sarah. My heart leaped, a mix of hope and dread. I opened the message, my hands trembling. "Dad, where are you? Mom is worried. Please come home. Let's talk about this." A follow-up from Jason. "Dad, you're overreacting. It was just socks. We love you. Please come back. Just socks." The words hit me like a physical blow. The utter lack of understanding, the casual dismissal of my pain. They still didn't get it. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't care. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What was there to say? How could I explain the years of quiet disappointment, the feeling of being an afterthought, the constant low-level pain of watching my children gravitate towards their mother, a woman who had given them less but seemingly received more? The thought of Lisa came to me, her tearful, grateful face as she held the car keys. She was a good mother, I had to admit. She was always there for them, always ready with a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. But she had also been the one to initiate the divorce, the one to leave our home and our family. And I had been the one to pick up the pieces, to be the steady, reliable rock, the one they could always count on, the one they took for granted. I put my phone away and walked outside. The snow had stopped and the world was a pristine, silent white. I stood on the porch, a freezing wind biting at my face, and looked at the lake. It was a frozen sheet of white, the trees on the opposite shore a dark, jagged line against the pale sky. The old pier was a skeletal arm reaching out into the frozen water. I thought about my own father. He was a quiet, stoic man who had worked his entire life as a mechanic. He wasn't one for grand gestures or emotional displays. He showed his love through his actions, through the long hours he worked to put food on the table, through the way he would silently fix my broken toys, through the lessons he taught me about responsibility and hard work. He had never been celebrated with a new car. He had lived a simple life and died a simple man, but he had my unwavering respect. My father had left me this cabin, a project, a symbol of a life he had never had the chance to live, and now, here I was, in the same position. I had worked my entire life for a family that had forgotten me. My children had given me a pair of socks, a clear message that I was not worthy of a grand gesture, of a grand love, and I knew in that moment that I had to live for myself now, for my father, for the man I had always wanted to be. I went back inside and started to clean. It was a therapeutic, almost meditative process. I swept away the dust, wiped down the grimy windows, and scrubbed the floors. The physical labor was a welcome distraction from the turmoil in my mind. Each swipe of the broom, each scrub of the sponge, felt like I was washing away the past, shedding the skin of the man I used to be. As I worked, I thought about what my life would look like from now on. I had a good job, a decent savings account. I could travel. I could finally fix this place up, make it a home. I could learn to fish, to build things, to live a life that was not defined by the needs and desires of others. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had always been a father, a husband, a provider. What would I be now? Who was David, the man who was not a father to two grown-up children? The cabin was starting to look better. The sun was higher in the sky now, its rays illuminating a small, dusty box in the corner of the living room. I walked over and opened it. Inside were old photographs, a few of my father and mother, and a lot of me. Me as a baby, as a child, as a teenager. Pictures from my wedding day. A happy, hopeful young man standing beside a radiant woman. Pictures of Jason and Sarah as babies, their tiny faces scrunched up in sleep. Pictures of birthday parties, of Christmas mornings, of family vacations. I looked at the photos, a wave of nostalgia and grief washing over me. I had loved them so much. I still did, but the love was a different kind now. It was a love that had to be guarded, protected from the pain and disappointment that had come to define it. I found a picture of me and my dad. He was teaching me how to change a tire, his face smudged with grease, a small knowing smile on his lips. I remembered that day. He had been patient, kind, and his hands, calloused and strong, had guided mine. He had taught me that a man's worth was in his actions, not in the gifts he received. I put the box of photos back, a new resolve hardening inside me. I had to follow my father's example. I had to build a life for myself, a life of purpose and meaning, a life that was not dependent on the approval or appreciation of others. My phone buzzed again, a flurry of texts from both Jason and Sarah. I didn't look at them. I knew what they would say. Apologies, justifications, pleas to come home. But I couldn't go back. Not to that. I had to stay here, in this quiet, dusty cabin. I had to rebuild, not just this place, but myself. And the first step was to let go of the past, to stop clinging to a family that had let go of me long ago. The socks were just a wake-up call, a harsh, painful one, but a wake-up call nonetheless. And now I was awake, and I wasn't going back to sleep. The days that followed were a blur of work and quiet contemplation. I returned to my regular job, but with a different mindset. I was no longer working to provide for a family that didn't appreciate it. I was working for myself, for my future. The hours no longer felt like a burden, but a means to an end. The cabin became my sanctuary. I spent every free moment there, cleaning, repairing, and planning. I found old tools in the shed, rusty but still functional, and started to work on the cabin's foundation. It was a metaphor, I realized. I was rebuilding my own foundation, brick by brick, board by board. I hadn't responded to any of the calls or texts from my children. They had tried at first, a panicked flurry of messages, but as the days turned into a week, the frequency dwindled. Their silence was a new kind of pain, a confirmation that they were not willing to truly understand my feelings, to meet me halfway. One afternoon, as I was repairing a broken window, I heard a car pull up the driveway. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew who it was. My hands, covered in sawdust and grime, paused their work. I wiped them on my jeans and walked outside. It was Lisa. She was standing by her new car, the sleek black Mercedes, looking out of place in the rustic, unkempt surroundings of the cabin. She looked tired, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a look of worry and frustration. "David," she said, her voice soft but strained, "I've been calling you. The kids have been calling you. What are you doing here?" I leaned against the porch railing, my arms crossed. "I'm fixing up the cabin, Lisa. What does it look like?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Look, I know you're upset. The kids feel terrible. They didn't mean to hurt you." "Didn't they?" I asked, a bitter smile on my face. "Because it feels like they did. It feels like they've been doing it for years." "David, please," she said, taking a step closer. "You're overreacting. It was just a pair of socks. They're young. They don't think about these things." "They don't think about these things?" I repeated, my voice rising. "They thought about getting you a brand new Mercedes, a luxury car, and they thought about getting me a pair of socks. The same kids who I worked 3 jobs for, who I drove a beat-up truck for, so they could have everything they wanted. And you, the woman who left me, gets a car. How is that not a sign of where I stand in their lives?" "It's not that simple, David," she said, her voice pleading. "They see me as a single woman, a mother who has to provide for herself. They wanted to help me, to give me something I needed. And what about me, Lisa? Don't I deserve something I need, like a little respect, a little appreciation, a little thought?" She didn't have an answer. She just stood there, her eyes full of a weary compassion that felt more like pity. "Look," I said, my voice softening, "I'm not asking for a car. I never did. I just wanted them to see me, to truly see me. And they didn't. They still don't. And you coming here and telling me I'm overreacting just proves my point." "So what are you going to do?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Just stay here? Cut them out of your life forever?" "I don't know what I'm going to do," I said truthfully, "but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going back to a life where I'm an afterthought. I'm not going to keep pretending everything is okay when it's not. I'm done, Lisa. I'm just done." She looked at me for a long moment, a sad understanding in her eyes. She knew. She had always known. She knew our children had chosen her, and she had never done anything to stop it. "I hope you find what you're looking for, David," she said, her voice a whisper. "I hope so too," I said, turning away. She got back into her car, the luxurious engine humming to life, and drove away. As I watched the car disappear down the road, I felt a strange sense of finality. The last link to my old life was gone, and I was on my own. I went back to work on the window, my hands moving with a newfound purpose. I was no longer working to prove a point to anyone. I was working to build a home, a life for myself. I was no longer a father, a husband, or a ghost. I was David, and that was enough. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The cabin slowly, but surely, transformed. The broken windows were replaced, the peeling paint was scraped and repainted, the leaky roof was patched. I worked with a quiet determination, the physical labor a soothing balm for my bruised soul. I started to meet people in town. The local hardware store owner, a gruff but friendly man named George, became a confidant. I told him bits and pieces of my story, and he listened without judgment, offering me advice on lumber and life. I joined a small local fishing club, and for the first time in years I had friends who weren't connected to my past. The new year came and went, and with it, the holidays. I spent Christmas and New Year's Eve alone at the cabin, but I wasn't lonely. I was content. I had a warm fire, a good book, and a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a very long time. I had blocked my children's numbers. It was a difficult decision, but it was a necessary one. I knew I couldn't move on with my life if I was constantly waiting for a phone call, a text message, a sign that they had finally understood. They had to come to me on my terms. They had to be the ones to reach out, to make a genuine effort. I was no longer the man who was waiting. I was the man who was building. And as I sat by the fire one cold winter night, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had been replaced by a quiet, deep sadness. But the sadness was no longer all-consuming. It was just a part of my story, a scar that had healed over, a reminder of a life I had left behind. I thought about the socks. I had left them on the coffee table. I wondered if they had been thrown away. I hoped so. They were a symbol of a pain I had overcome, a final act of a play that had finally ended, and the curtain was now drawn. A new act had begun, and this time, I was the protagonist, and I was ready to write my own story. Spring arrived, a symphony of green and gold that breathed life back into the world. The snow melted, revealing the muddy, rich earth. I started a small garden, a patch of land where I planted vegetables and flowers. It was a new kind of work for me, a slow, patient process of nurturing and waiting. The garden became my therapist. As I tilled the soil, planted the seeds, and watered the young sprouts, I thought about my life. My relationship with my children was a garden I had tended with all my heart, but the soil had been fallow. The seeds of love and respect had failed to take root. Now, I was planting a new garden, one that would bear fruit, one that would nourish me. I hadn't heard from my children in months. The silence was deafening at first, a constant nagging void. But over time it became a quiet space, a room for my own thoughts and feelings. I realized that my self-worth had become so intertwined with their approval, their love, that I had forgotten who I was without them. One day I was at the hardware store, picking up some gardening tools, when I saw her. A woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She was in the gardening aisle, her head tilted to the side as she studied a packet of seeds. I had seen her around town, but we had never spoken. Her name was Elizabeth. "Tough choice, isn't it?" I said, gesturing to the seeds. "So many options, so little time." She laughed, a light, melodic sound. "Tell me about it. I have a tiny balcony garden and I want to plant everything." We talked for a while about gardening, about our lives, about the small joys of living in a small town. She was a librarian, a widow, a woman who had also, in her own way, started over. We exchanged numbers, and a week later we went for coffee. Our coffee dates turned into dinners, and our dinners turned into long walks by the lake. I found myself opening up to her, telling her about my life, my divorce, and the night of the socks. She listened without judgment, her eyes full of a deep, quiet empathy. "I understand," she said one evening, as we sat on the porch of my cabin, watching the sunset. "It's not about the socks, is it? It's about what they represented. It's about a wound that had been festering for a long time." Her words were a balm to my soul. For the first time, someone truly understood. She wasn't telling me I was overreacting. She wasn't telling me to just get over it. She was simply validating my pain. "What do you think will happen now?" she asked, her voice soft. I sighed, looking out at the darkening sky. "I don't know. I love them. I will always love them. But I can't go back to the way things were. They have to understand that I'm not a vending machine, a man they can just go to when they need something. I'm a person. I have feelings. I have my own life." She reached out and took my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "You're doing the right thing, David. You're building a new life, a life for yourself. And that's the most important thing you can do. For you and for them. Because if they ever decide to come back, they will have to meet the new David. A David who knows his own worth." Her words resonated with me. I was no longer the man who was waiting for a phone call. I was no longer the man who was looking for a validation he would never receive. I was the man who was building a life, a beautiful, quiet, and peaceful life. The garden began to thrive. The tomato plants grew tall and strong, their leaves a vibrant green. The cucumbers dangled from the vines, their skin a deep, rich green. The flowers bloomed in a riot of color, a silent testament to the life I was nurturing. One afternoon I was weeding the garden, my hands in the dirt, when my phone, which I had long since unblocked but rarely used, buzzed. It was a text message. A photo. I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a picture of a pair of socks. The same black wool-blend socks I had left on the coffee table. The text was from Jason. "I found them, Dad, I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they were the first signs of a crack in the wall of silence. I looked at the picture, and I didn't feel the sharp sting of pain anymore. I felt a quiet, profound sadness, and then a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally beginning to understand. I didn't respond. The message was from Jason, but it was also a message for me. I had to let them come to me. I had to let them walk the path to find their way back to me, and if they did, I would be here, in my garden, building a new life, a different kind of harvest. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The text from Jason was a small stone dropped into a calm lake, the ripples spreading out and touching everything. I found myself thinking about them more, not with anger, but with a quiet curiosity. What were they thinking? What had prompted Jason to send that picture? I was still committed to my new life, my new routine. The cabin was now a home, the garden a source of pride and nourishment. My relationship with Elizabeth had blossomed into something beautiful and easy. She understood my past, and I respected hers. We were two people who had found solace in each other's company. Two people who were not looking to fill a void, but to share a full life. One evening, Elizabeth and I were sitting on the porch, watching the fireflies dance in the warm summer air. I told her about the text from Jason. "What do you think he's trying to say?" she asked, her voice soft. "I think he's trying to say he's sorry," I said, a rare note of vulnerability in my voice. "But he doesn't know how to say it. He's trying to talk to me through a pair of socks." We were both silent for a moment, listening to the crickets chirping. "I think you're right," she said. "He's not a kid anymore, David. He's a man, and men sometimes have a hard time with words. He's trying to tell you that he gets it now, that he understands what those socks meant to you." Her words gave me a new perspective. I had been so focused on my own hurt, my own pain, that I hadn't considered theirs. The text wasn't just a sign of their regret. It was a sign of their confusion, their guilt, their own pain. I decided to respond, not with words, but with an action. The next day I went to a small local store that sold handmade goods. I found a beautiful hand-carved wooden box, and I bought it. I went to the post office, and without a return address, I mailed it to Jason's apartment. I didn't include a note. A few days later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, but then I answered. "Dad." It was Jason's voice, a tentative, hopeful sound. "Jason," I said, my voice steady. "Dad, I got the box. What is it?" "It's a box," I said simply. "A place to put things, to keep them safe." He was silent for a moment. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Dad, I don't know what to say," he finally said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We were so wrong. We were so thoughtless. We didn't think. We just thought Mom needed it more." "I know," I said, a lump forming in my throat. "And I understand that. But what you didn't understand was that I needed something too. Not a car, not an expensive gift. I just needed to feel like you saw me, like I mattered." "You do, Dad," he said, the words a desperate whisper. "You always have. We were just stupid. We were caught up in our own lives, in what we thought was important, and we forgot about you. We took you for granted." "I know," I said again, the words easier this time. "I know. We talked for a long time. He told me about their lives, about his work, about Sarah's new job. He told me about the fights they had had with their mother, about the guilt they had felt since that night. He told me that Lisa had been the one to insist on the car, the one to push them to make a grand gesture, and he confessed that he had gone along with it, a part of him knowing it was wrong. "She always made it seem like she was the one who had sacrificed everything," he said, his voice laced with resentment. "She made us feel like we owed her." I was silent. This was new information, a confirmation of a suspicion I had harbored for a long time. Lisa had always been the victim, the one who had to be protected, celebrated, and I had always been the man in the background, the one who was just there. "Where are you, Dad?" he asked, his voice full of a longing I hadn't heard in a long time. "Can we see you? Sarah wants to see you too." "I'm at the cabin," I said. "And yes, you can come, but not today. I need a little more time." I hung up the phone, a jumble of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, sadness, a quiet sense of triumph. They had finally reached out. They had finally come to me, and they had finally apologized. I walked back to the garden, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The tomatoes were ripe, the cucumbers were ready for picking. I reached down and plucked a small tomato, its skin warm from the sun. I held it in my hand, a perfect, red sphere. This was my harvest. Not the money I had earned, not the things I had bought, but the peace I had found. The peace that came with letting go, with building a new life, with finding my own worth. And maybe, just maybe, the peace that came with a new beginning, a different kind of reconciliation. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if our relationship could ever be what it once was, but I knew that the first, most difficult step had been taken. The unspoken words had finally been said, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. A path that was all my own. The phone call with Jason had opened a door that I had thought was permanently closed. The following weeks were filled with short, tentative texts from both him and Sarah. They asked about my life, my garden, the cabin. They sent me pictures of their own lives, their new apartments, their new jobs. They were building a bridge, a shaky, fragile thing, but a bridge nonetheless. I responded in kind, sharing photos of the cabin's progress and the vibrant growth of my garden. I kept my responses simple, short, and to the point. I was not going to fall back into the old patterns of oversharing, of trying too hard to please them. This was their journey, their redemption, and I was just here waiting on the other side. One Saturday morning, I was working on the roof of the cabin, repairing a leak, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I climbed down the ladder, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and nerves. It was Jason and Sarah. They were standing by his car, looking up at the cabin, their faces a mixture of surprise and awe. The old, dilapidated cabin they had known as children was gone, replaced by a rustic but well-kept home. The lawn was neatly mowed, the garden was a riot of color, and the old, beat-up truck was parked beside a new, shiny sedan. They saw me and walked toward me, their hands in their pockets, a nervous smile on their faces. "Hey, Dad," Jason said, his voice a little shaky. "The place looks amazing." "It's a work in progress," I said, a small smile on my face. Sarah, ever the emotional one, just walked up and hugged me, her arms wrapping tightly around my waist. I hugged her back, the familiar warmth of her body a shock to my system. I hadn't realized how much I had missed them. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered into my chest, her voice muffled. "I'm so sorry." I just held her, my eyes welling up with tears. I didn't need words. Her hug, her presence, was all I needed. We stood there for a long moment, a quiet reconciliation taking place in the stillness of the afternoon. When we finally pulled apart, they both looked at me, their faces full of a raw, honest emotion. "Can we help?" Jason asked, gesturing to the tools. "We want to help." I looked at their clean clothes, their soft, uncalloused hands, and I laughed. "You're not exactly dressed for manual labor, but you can make us some lunch. There's a grocery store a few miles down the road." They both nodded, a look of relief on their faces. They were not used to doing things for me. They were used to things being done for them. This was a new dynamic, a new beginning. They came back a few hours later, their arms laden with bags of groceries. We all worked in the small kitchen, laughing and talking, the conversation flowing easily. They asked me about my life, about Elizabeth, about my garden. I answered their questions honestly, sharing parts of myself that I had kept hidden for so long. "We didn't know, Dad," Sarah said as she chopped vegetables for a salad. "We really didn't. We just thought you were fine. You were always so strong, so stoic. You never complained. We just assumed." "I know," I said, a quiet understanding in my voice. "And that's partly my fault. I never asked for anything. I always just gave. But that was a mistake. I should have told you that I needed things too. I needed your time, your attention, your love. Not just your money or your gifts." "We understand now," Jason said, his voice earnest. "We do, and we want to make it right. We want to be a part of your life again." "You are a part of my life," I said. "You always will be. But our relationship has to be different now. It has to be built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding, not on gifts or money or obligations." They both nodded, their faces solemn. The conversation had shifted from the casual to the profound, and we all knew it. This was the real work, the work of healing and reconciliation. We ate lunch on the porch, the sun warm on our faces. We talked about everything and nothing. The afternoon passed in a comfortable silence, filled with the simple joy of being together, of being a family again, a different kind of family, a better one. As they were getting ready to leave, Jason pulled me aside. "Dad," he said, his voice low, "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small rectangular box. It was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the small hand-carved box I had sent him. I opened it, my heart in my throat. Inside was a new pair of socks. Not the cheap wool blend ones, but a luxurious pair of cashmere socks. Beside them was a small folded note. I opened the note and read it. "Dear Dad, these are not socks. These are a promise that we will never take you for granted again, a promise that we will always see you, always hear you, always love you, your kids. I looked at the socks, and then at my son, a well of emotion rising inside me. He wasn't just giving me a pair of socks. He was giving me his heart. He was giving me his promise. "Thank you, Jason," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "They're beautiful." He just nodded, a tear rolling down his cheek. He didn't need to say anything else. We had said all we needed to say. As I watched them drive away, the sun setting in the distance, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long, long time. The bridge was still being built, but the first steps had been taken. And I knew with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating that we would all make it to the other side. My kids hadn't just given me socks, they had given me a new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. The following weeks were a slow and steady process of rebuilding our relationships. Phone calls became more frequent, and not just on special occasions. Jason would call to ask for my advice on a work project, and Sarah would call to tell me about a new book she was reading. They were small steps, but they were significant. We were learning to be a family again, a family that communicated, a family that truly listened. One weekend, they came to visit me at the cabin, bringing their mother, Lisa, with them. The visit was my idea. I knew that if we were to truly heal, we all had to be in the same room, to address the elephant that had been standing between us for years. The tension in the air was palpable as they arrived. Lisa was dressed in a stylish pantsuit, a little out of place in the rustic setting of the cabin. She looked at me, her eyes full of a cautious curiosity. We hadn't spoken since our last encounter, and the unspoken words between us were a heavy weight. "The place looks different, David," she said, her voice a little strained. "It's a work in progress," I said, repeating my usual refrain. We sat on the porch, the four of us, the silence stretching between us like a physical thing. The kids, uncharacteristically, were quiet, looking from me to their mother, a look of anxiety on their faces. Finally, I spoke. "I asked you all here today because I think we need to talk. Not about the socks or the car, but about everything, about how we got here." Lisa sighed, a weary resignation on her face. "David, do we have to? Can't we just move on?" "No, we can't," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "We can't move on until we unpack the past. We can't build a new future on a foundation of unspoken resentments." I looked at my children. "You both have to understand something. This wasn't just about a pair of socks. This was about years of feeling like I was an afterthought, like I was a secondary character in the story of my own life." I looked at Lisa. "And you, Lisa, you have to admit your part in this. You always made it seem like you were the one who had sacrificed everything. You made them feel like they owed you, and you allowed them to take me for granted. You created a dynamic where they felt they had to choose between us." Lisa's face flushed and she looked away, her hands clenched in her lap. "That's not fair, David. I never told them to choose." "You didn't have to," I said. "You just had to let them." And you did. The kids were silent, their faces etched with a complex mix of guilt and understanding. "Mom," Sarah finally said, her voice trembling, "he's right. You always made us feel like you were the one who needed us more. You always made us feel like you were the one who had suffered the most." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "I was just lonely," she whispered, her voice cracking. "After the divorce, I was so lonely. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. I just wanted you to love me. I just wanted to feel loved." The words hung in the air, a raw, honest confession. We were all silent for a long moment, the truth of her words sinking in. "We all did things we regret," I said, my voice softer now. "I should have told you how I felt sooner. I should have asked for what I needed, but I didn't. I was too proud, too stubborn, and for that, I am sorry." I looked at Jason and Sarah. "I love you both more than anything in this world, and all I want is for us to be a family again. A real family, one that is built on honesty and respect, not on resentment and regret." The dam broke. Sarah started to cry, and Jason put a comforting arm around her. Lisa reached out and took my hand, a silent apology passing between us. We sat there for a long time, the silence no longer heavy and tense but a peaceful, healing presence. We had finally opened the door to the past, and in doing so, we had unlocked the door to the future. We spent the rest of the day talking, laughing, and even crying a little. The kids helped me in the garden, and Lisa, surprisingly, helped me make dinner. We ate together on the porch, the setting sun painting the sky in a breathtaking display of color. As they were getting ready to leave, Lisa walked up to me. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice soft and sincere. "For today, for everything." "You're welcome, Lisa," I said, a small, genuine smile on my face. "For everything." I watched them drive away, a feeling of lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in a very long time. The weight was gone. The resentment was gone. The pain was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was just a part of my story, a story that was now finally truly my own. I walked back into the cabin, a sense of peace settling over me. The old walls of the cabin had held a lot of unspoken pain, but tonight they had witnessed a different kind of gathering. A gathering of a family that was no longer broken, but in the process of being healed. And I was ready to continue the work, one day at a time. The visit with my family had been a turning point, but it was not a magic wand. The relationships were still fragile, still in need of care and attention. We had opened the door, but we still had to walk through it. My children continued to visit, not with the intention of making up for past mistakes, but with the intention of being a part of my life. They learned about my garden, my new friends, and my plans for the future. One afternoon I was at the local lumber yard, picking up some materials for a new project. When I saw Lisa, she was looking at different types of wood, a thoughtful expression on her face. She saw me, and her face broke into a hesitant smile. "David," she said, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same thing," I said, a small smile on my face. "What are you working on?" She looked a little embarrassed. "Well, you inspired me. I've been thinking about what you said, about needing a project, a life that is truly my own. So I'm building a bookshelf for my apartment. A real one, not one from a kit." I was genuinely surprised. The Lisa I knew was not a hands-on kind of woman. She was an artist, a creative, a dreamer. But here she was, in a lumberyard, a tool in her hand, a look of determination on her face. "That's a great idea, Lisa," I said, and I meant it. "I have no idea what I'm doing," she confessed, a small laugh escaping her lips. "I was hoping you could, help me. Not build it for me, but just guide me. Tell me what I need." I hesitated. The thought of spending more time with my ex-wife was a little daunting, but I saw the sincerity in her eyes, the vulnerability in her voice. She wasn't just asking for help with a bookshelf. She was asking for a bridge, a new kind of connection. "Sure, Lisa," I said. "I'd be happy to help. Let's start with the basics." We spent the next hour in the lumberyard talking about wood types, tools, and measurements. The conversation was easy and natural, a quiet, comfortable rhythm that we hadn't shared in years. It was a new kind of partnership, one that was not based on a shared past, but on a shared present. The bookshelf became our project. She would come to my cabin every weekend, and we would work on it together. We would talk about our lives, about our fears, about our dreams. We talked about the kids, about the divorce, about the pain we had both carried for so long. "I was so afraid," she confessed one afternoon, as she sanded a piece of wood, her voice low and soft. "I was so afraid of being alone. I had been a mother and a wife for so long, and I didn't know who I was without you. So I built a new life, a life that was full of things and people, a life that was so busy I wouldn't have time to be lonely. And in doing so, I pushed the kids away and I pushed you away. I was afraid too," I confessed. "I was afraid of being forgotten. I was afraid of not being needed anymore. And in my fear, I pushed you away too." We had both, in our own way, run away from our pain. She had run towards a busy life, and I had run towards a solitary one. And in doing so, we had hurt the people we loved the most. The bookshelf was finally finished. It was a beautiful piece of work, a testament to our partnership, a symbol of our reconciliation. We stood there looking at it, a quiet sense of pride in our hearts. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice full of a genuine gratitude, "for everything. You taught me that it's okay to slow down, that it's okay to build something with your own two hands, that it's okay to be imperfect, and that it's okay to ask for help. You taught me something too," I said. "You taught me that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to admit you're scared, that it's okay to reach out." We had both, in our own way, found a new kind of freedom. We were no longer bound by the past, but we were connected by it. The wounds were still there, but they were no longer open and bleeding. They were healing, slowly but surely. The kids came to see the bookshelf, and they were amazed. They saw not just a piece of furniture, but a symbol of their parents' reconciliation, a testament to a new kind of family. "You guys are incredible," Sarah said, her voice full of a genuine awe. "You've really found a way to be friends." "We're more than friends," I said, and I looked at Lisa, a soft smile on my face. "We're a team." The words hung in the air, a profound declaration. We were a team, not a couple, not a family in the traditional sense, but a team that was dedicated to our children's happiness, to our own peace, and to the difficult but beautiful work of healing. As I watched them all leave, the bookshelf in the back of Lisa's new car, I felt a sense of peace that was so deep, it was almost spiritual. The journey had been long and painful, but it had been worth it. I had not only found a new life for myself, but I had also helped to heal my old one. And in doing so, I had found a new kind of love. A love that was not about romance or obligation, but about a shared humanity, a shared journey and a shared hope for a better future. The bookshelf project had been a catalyst, a physical representation of the healing that was taking place within our family. My relationship with Lisa was no longer one of resentment and polite cordiality, but of mutual respect and a quiet, comfortable camaraderie. We were no longer a divorced couple with children, but two individuals who had found a new and better way to coexist. The kids, in turn, had grown in ways I hadn't thought possible. They were more mature, more empathetic, and more attuned to the needs of others. They called me regularly, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely wanted to talk to me. They came to the cabin not just to see me, but to help me. Jason, with his engineering mind, helped me with the cabin's electrical wiring, and Sarah, with her marketing skills, helped me create a website to sell the vegetables from my garden. The garden had become a source of income, a small but steady stream of money that gave me a sense of purpose and a feeling of self-reliance. I was no longer just a man who had lost his way. I was a man who had found a new path, a man who was building a life, not just for himself, but for a community. One day I was at the farmer's market selling my vegetables when I saw my children. They were standing by my stall, a look of pride on their faces. "Hey, Dad," Jason said, a wide smile on his face. "Look at you, a real farmer." "A part-time one," I said, a laugh escaping my lips. "We brought someone to meet you," Sarah said, her voice a little nervous. And then I saw her, a young woman, a little younger than Sarah, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. She was holding a small brown box in her hands. "Dad," Sarah said, "this is Emily. She's a good friend of ours. She's a psychologist." My heart sank. A psychologist? Had they brought her here to fix me? The old resentment, the old pain, a sudden familiar feeling of being misunderstood, came rushing back. "Hi, Emily," I said, my voice a little cold. "I'm not sure what you're doing here." "Dad, please," Sarah said, a look of pleading in her eyes. "She's not here to fix you. She's here because she has something to give you, a gift." Emily walked up to me, her hands trembling a little as she held out the box. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice soft and sincere, "I am so sorry for this. I have been listening to your story from Jason and Sarah, and I wanted to do something to show you that you are not alone, that what you're feeling is valid, that what you've done is incredible." I looked at the box, and then at her, my mind a jumble of emotions. She was a stranger. Why was she here? I don't understand," I said. She took a deep breath. "The socks," she said, her voice a whisper. "Jason told me about the socks, and what they meant to you. A symbol of being overlooked, of being forgotten. A symbol of a pain that had festered for years. And I wanted to show you that a symbol can also be a symbol of healing, a symbol of a new beginning." I opened the box, my hands shaking. Inside, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, was a pair of socks. Not the black wool-blend ones, and not the luxurious cashmere ones. These were handmade, knitted with a soft, warm yarn, a beautiful, intricate pattern woven into the fabric. The tag on them read, "For the man who built a new life from the ground up." I looked at the socks and then at Emily, a wave of emotion so profound it took my breath away. She had listened, she had heard me, she had understood, and she had done something about it. A small, simple act of kindness that was so powerful, it felt like a miracle. I don't know what to say," I said, a tear rolling down my cheek. "You don't have to say anything," she said, her voice full of a gentle compassion. "You just have to know that you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved." I looked at my children, their faces filled with a quiet pride. They had not just brought me a friend, they had brought me a new kind of love. A love that was not about a shared past, but about a shared future. A love that was not about a family that was broken, but about a community that was whole. The three of them stood there, my children and their new friend, a living, breathing testament to the healing that had taken place. They were no longer the two young adults who had given me a pair of socks. They were two empathetic, kind-hearted people who had helped me find my way back home, and for that, I was forever grateful. I put the box in my pocket, the handmade socks a warm, comforting presence against my leg. The socks were no longer a symbol of pain. They were a symbol of hope. They were a symbol of a man who had lost everything, but had, in the process, found himself. And in finding himself, he had found his way back to the people he loved, and to the people who, in their own imperfect way, had always loved him back. The story of the socks had taken on a life of its own. It had become a cautionary tale in our family, a reminder of the importance of communication, of empathy, and of not taking the people you love for granted. It had also become a story of redemption, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the possibility of a new beginning. My relationship with my children was not perfect. We still had our disagreements, our misunderstandings, but now we talked about them. We didn't let them fester, didn't let them become a wound that would later become a scar. We were honest, open, and unafraid to be vulnerable. The cabin was finally finished. It was a beautiful, rustic home, a place of peace and quiet. I had a thriving garden, a new group of friends, and a growing relationship with Elizabeth. I was a content man, a man who had, in his own way, found a second chance at life. One evening I was sitting on the porch with Elizabeth watching the sunset when my phone buzzed. It was a video call from Sarah and Jason. I answered it, a smile on my face. "Hey guys," I said. "What's up?" "Dad," Jason said, his voice a little shaky. "We have something we want to show you." They turned the camera and I saw a screen with a YouTube video playing. The title of the video was "My Dad's Story, How a Pair of Socks Changed Everything." My heart pounded in my chest. "What is this?" I asked. "It's our story, Dad," Sarah said, her voice full of emotion. "It's a video we made for you, and for us. We wanted to tell the world about the incredible man we have as a father. We wanted to tell the world about the power of forgiveness and the importance of family." The video was beautiful. It was a montage of old family photos, clips of me working in the garden, and interviews with Jason, Sarah, and even Lisa. They talked about the night of the socks, about the pain, the anger, and the long, difficult journey of reconciliation. They talked about my resilience, my quiet strength, and my unwavering love for them. The most powerful part of the video was the ending. They had interviewed Emily, the young psychologist who had given me the handmade socks. She talked about the power of symbols, of how a small, seemingly insignificant gift could hold so much meaning. She talked about how my story was not just my own, but a story for everyone. A story of a man who had lost everything, but had, in the process, found a new kind of freedom. The video ended with a picture of me, standing in my garden, a soft smile on my face. And then, a title card appeared. "My Dad's Story, a new video every week." I looked at the screen, my eyes blurred with tears. "You guys, you did this for me." "No, Dad," Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. "We did this for us. We wanted to share your story with the world. We wanted to show people that a family can be broken, but it can also be mended. We wanted to show people that it's never too late to start over. And we wanted to show the world that we are so proud to be your children." I was speechless. My children, my two beautiful, kind-hearted children, had not just given me a gift. They had given me a legacy. They had taken my pain and turned it into a story of hope. They had taken my anger and turned it into a message of love. They had taken my loneliness and turned it into a community of people who were inspired by my story. I was no longer just the man with the socks. I was the man who had turned his pain into a purpose, the man who had found a new kind of family, the man who had in his own way become a hero. I looked at the screen, a genuine, deep-seated happiness in my heart. The socks were no longer a symbol of pain. They were a symbol of a love that was stronger than any pain, a love that was deeper than any resentment, a love that was finally, truly ours. And as I watched my children, their faces filled with a genuine, heartfelt pride, I knew that I had not only found my way back to them, but I had also finally found my way back to myself. My story was no longer just my own. It was a story for the world, and I was ready to share it, one chapter at a time. The YouTube channel, My Dad's Story, became a surprising success. The first video, a raw and emotional account of the night of the socks, resonated with a huge audience. Comments poured in, sharing similar stories of family conflicts, of feeling overlooked, and of the long, difficult road to reconciliation. My children's vulnerability had struck a chord, and their honesty had created a community. I became a kind of reluctant public figure, a symbol of resilience and hope. The story wasn't just about me and my kids anymore. It was about the universal struggle to be seen and appreciated by the people we love. Jason and Sarah would come to the cabin every weekend, not just to visit, but to film new content. We would talk about the past, about our journey, about the lessons we had learned. They were no longer my children who took me for granted. They were my partners, my collaborators, my friends. We were building something together, a legacy that was not about a name or a fortune, but about a shared humanity. One weekend, as we were filming, I brought up the topic of Lisa. "We should include your mum in the videos," I said. "Her perspective is just as important as ours." Jason and Sarah looked at each other a little hesitant. "Are you sure, Dad? We don't want to make things awkward." "It's not about making things awkward," I said. "It's about being honest. This story is not just my story, it's hers too, and it's yours. We all had a part to play in this, and we all have to take responsibility for our actions. That's the only way we can truly heal." They agreed, and the following weekend, we all sat down together, the camera rolling, and talked about the past. It was a difficult conversation, filled with tears and uncomfortable silences, but it was also a healing conversation, a final act of letting go. Lisa, surprisingly, was incredibly vulnerable. She talked about her loneliness after the divorce, her fear of not being needed, and her regret for the way she had manipulated our children's affection. She confessed that she had always felt a little threatened by my close relationship with them, and in her insecurity, she had created a dynamic where they felt they had to choose between us. The video, titled The Other Side of the Story, was the most powerful one we had ever made. It showed a side of her that no one had ever seen before, a side that was raw, honest, and filled with a profound sense of regret. It was a turning point, not just for our family, but for our audience. They saw not just a story of a hero and a villain, but a story of two flawed people who had made mistakes and who were now, in their own way, trying to make things right. The comments poured in, not just for me, but for her. People were thanking her for her honesty, for her vulnerability, for her willingness to admit her own flaws. It was a beautiful thing to witness. The story had not just healed our family, it had also given us a new sense of purpose. We were no longer a family that was bound by obligation, but a family that was bound by a shared mission. A mission to tell our story, to help others, and to show the world that it is possible to find healing and redemption in the most unexpected places. And as I sat there, surrounded by my children, and by the woman who was once my wife, I realized that I had found a new kind of family. A family that was not just defined by blood, but by a shared journey. A family that was not just about a past that was painful, but about a future that was full of hope. The socks were just socks, but they were also the beginning of a story that was still being written, a story that was still unfolding, a story that was, in its own way, a testament to the power of love, of forgiveness, and of the beautiful, messy, and complicated journey of being human. The success of the YouTube channel brought with it a new set of challenges and opportunities. Our story had touched a nerve, and we were suddenly being invited to speak at conferences, to be interviewed on podcasts, and to share our story with a wider audience. It was a little overwhelming at first. I, a quiet, simple man who had spent his life working with his hands, was now a public figure. But I was no longer alone. My children were my support system, my partners in this new venture. They were the ones who handled the interviews, who managed the social media, who were the face of our story. I was the voice, the heart, the man who had lived the story. One evening, as we were preparing for an interview, Jason looked at me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking. You've told your story. We've told our story. Mom has told her story. But what's the next chapter? What do we talk about now? It was a good question. The story of the socks was over. The reconciliation was complete. What came next? The next chapter, I said, a smile on my face, is about living the next chapter. It's about showing people that this wasn't a one-time thing. It's a lifelong process. It's about showing people that a family can be a messy, complicated thing, but it can also be a beautiful, evolving thing. And that became the focus of our new videos. We started to film our daily lives, the small, quiet moments of a family that was no longer broken, but in the process of being healed. We showed our viewers our disagreements, our misunderstandings, and the way we worked through them. We showed them that a family that truly listens, a family that truly communicates, a family that is not afraid to be vulnerable, is a family that can overcome anything. We started to bring in other people, other families, who had been through similar experiences. We talked to them, we listened to them, and we helped them find their own way back to each other. The YouTube channel was no longer just about our story. It was a platform for others, a community of people who were all in their own way on the same journey. I was no longer just a man who had been hurt. I was a man who had helped others to heal. I was no longer just a man who had lost his way. I was a man who had found a new purpose. I was no longer just a man who had a story to tell. I was a man who was helping others tell their own. And through it all, my relationship with Elizabeth continued to blossom. She was my anchor, my confidant, my best friend. She was the one who was there for me, not for my story, but for me. She was the one who saw David, the man, not David, the symbol. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, watching the stars, I looked at her, and I knew. I knew that my journey was not just about reconciliation with my family. It was about finding a new kind of love, a love that was not about a shared past, but about a shared future. A love that was not about a family that was broken, but about a life that was finally truly whole. And I knew with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating that my story was just beginning. The story of the socks was over. The story of a new life had just begun, and I was ready to write it one day at a time. The years passed, and our family's story became a part of the cultural zeitgeist. The YouTube channel had millions of subscribers, and our story had been featured in major publications and television shows. The quiet, simple life I had once lived was a distant memory. I was now a man who was recognized in the street, a man who received letters from people all over the world, a man who was a symbol of hope and healing. But despite the fame, I had never forgotten the man I once was. I still worked in my garden. I still fixed things with my own two hands, and I still cherished the quiet moments with Elizabeth, my children, and my ex-wife. The story had brought us all closer. My children were now grown adults, with their own lives, their own families. Jason had a beautiful wife and a daughter of his own, and Sarah was engaged to a wonderful man. They were both still active in the YouTube channel, but they had also found their own paths, their own voices. One day I received a phone call from Sarah. Her voice was a little shaky, a little nervous. "Dad," she said, "I have something to tell you, something important." My heart pounded in my chest. "What is it, sweetie?" I'm getting married," she said, her voice a little choked up, "and I want you to walk me down the aisle." A wave of emotion so profound it took my breath away washed over me. I had always dreamed of this day, of walking my daughter down the aisle, of giving her away to a man who would love her as much as I did. But after the night of the socks, I had given up on that dream. I had thought it was lost forever. I would be honored, Sarah," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But Dad," she said, her voice a little hesitant, "I have a favor to ask. I want you and Mom to walk me down the aisle, together." My breath hitched. My heart pounded in my chest. To walk down the aisle with the woman who had once been my wife, the woman who had in her own way contributed to the pain? I don't know, Sarah," I said. "That's a lot to ask." "I know, Dad," she said. "I know, but you've both taught me so much. You've taught me about forgiveness, about reconciliation, about love. And I want my wedding day to be a celebration of that, a celebration of a family that was broken but is now whole. I want to honor both of you, for everything you've done for me, for everything you've taught me." I was silent for a long moment, the words sinking in. She was right. This was not just about me anymore. It was about us. It was about a family that had come full circle, a family that had in its own way found its way back to each other. I looked at Elizabeth, who had been listening to the conversation, a gentle smile on her face. She nodded, a silent gesture of support. "Okay, Sarah," I said, a tear rolling down my cheek. "We'll do it. We'll walk you down the aisle together." I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "Thank you so much." I hung up the phone, a jumble of emotions swirling inside me. Fear, excitement, nervousness, and a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long, but it had been worth it. I had not just found a new life for myself, I had also helped to heal my old one. And as I sat there on the porch of the cabin I had built with my own 2 hands, I realized that the story of the socks was not a story of pain, but a story of love. It was a story of a family that had lost its way, but had in the process found a new kind of strength, a new kind of love, a new kind of hope. And I knew with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating that my story was a story for the ages, a story that would be told for generations to come, a story that was a testament to the power of a single act of kindness, of a single act of forgiveness, of a single act of love. The day of the wedding was a beautiful sunny day. The venue was a beautiful rustic barn, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers and a sense of joy and hope. I was standing at the altar, beside the man who would soon be my son-in-law, a quiet sense of pride in my heart. The music started, and my heart pounded in my chest. I watched as my beautiful daughter, Sarah, walked down the aisle, a radiant smile on her face. But she was not alone. She was walking with her mother, Lisa, and me. We were on either side of her, our hands gently resting on her arm. Lisa was wearing a beautiful, elegant dress, and her face was filled with a serene, profound joy. We were not a couple, but we were a team. We were a family. As we walked down the aisle, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The night of the socks, the pain, the anger, the long, difficult road to reconciliation. I thought about the man I once was, and the man I had become. A man who was not defined by his past, but by his future. A man who was not defined by his pain, but by his peace. We reached the altar, and I gently kissed Sarah on the cheek. I looked at Lisa, a silent exchange of gratitude and respect passing between us. We had both, in our own way, made mistakes, but we had also, in our own way, found our way back to each other. The wedding ceremony was beautiful, a celebration of love, of family, and of a new beginning. As I sat there, watching my daughter say her vows, I realized something. My journey was not just about healing a family. It was about finding a new kind of life, a life that was not about a past that was painful, but about a future that was full of hope. And as the ceremony ended, and my daughter and her new husband walked down the aisle, a new family, a new generation, a new story, I felt a sense of peace that was so deep it was almost spiritual. I had not only found my way back to my family, but I had also finally found my way back to myself. I looked at the socks, the handmade ones from Emily, which I had placed in my pocket for the day. They were no longer a symbol of pain. They were a symbol of a love that was stronger than any pain, a love that was deeper than any resentment, a love that was finally, truly, ours. And as I sat there, surrounded by the people I loved, my heart filled with a profound sense of gratitude, I knew that my story was a story for the ages, a story of a family that was broken, but had, in the process, found a new kind of strength, a new kind of love, a new kind of hope. The socks were just socks, but they were also the beginning of a story that was still being written, a story that was still unfolding, a story that was in its own way a testament to the power of love, of forgiveness, and of the beautiful, messy, and complicated journey of being human. And I was ready to live the rest of it, one day at a time.